Okay, we're recording. Okay, so, Chairman Berlin, you can call the meeting to order.
9 o'clock, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Can we stand and have a pledge, please? Pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
Allegiance
to
to the flag of the
the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. May I call on Lori to do roll call, please?
Mike Berlin,
Here.
Laura Negro,
Here.
Pat Kinney,
Here.
Ron, Ron, are you there? Marty Vitek,
Yeah.
who do we have signed in under 0672?
That's Supervisor Rich Huber.
So it appears that Ron is not present.
I know he was in New York, this past week. He actually dialed in, so he may be just as busy today dealing with the business in New York. Okay, go ahead, Chairman.
All right. With that, we declare a quorum. Item number 2 on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there anything to add or delete from this agenda at this time?
I move we approve the agenda.
Is that a motion and a second?
Yes. Yeah.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Who was the
Opposed?
second on that?
Pat,
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's good practice, by the way, if you're making motions to make sure you introduce yourself, since the minute taker is downstairs.
motion carried. Okay, going on to number 3, do we have any 3-minute public comments? Mr. Huber, you got something?
You have a public comment. You can come forward.
Okay. Mayor.
Welcome.
Welcome. This is Dale Kupchak, 1614 9th Avenue West here in Ashland. And I'm currently the chair of the Northwoods Rail Transit Commission. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about where the rail stands today. And also, I understand you're going to be working on budget in the next few months, etc. And we're also looking for funding to continue with the Northwoods Rail Transit Commission. The Transit Commission currently is 13 counties in northeastern Wisconsin: Ashland, Rusk, Merritt.
Muted. Clark's computer is muted.
What?
Yeah, you were muted. Clark, your computer was muted for part of that, so.
Okay, I see if I mute myself, it does all the mic, so I apologize for that. Thank you for pointing that out.
Should I start
Go
over?
backwards about 20 seconds.
Rewind.
Okay. Good morning, Dale Kupchak, 1614 9th Avenue West here in Ashland, and I'm the chair of the Northwoods Rail Transit Commission. The Transit Commission consists of 13 counties in northeastern Wisconsin: Ashland, Rusk, Marathon, and east of the Michigan border, and 9 counties in the UP of Michigan. And we've been working to get rail back into this whole area. And we've worked with our state, federal legislators to write letters. Basically, the new governor has been wonderful to work with, plus a new DOT. Previously, we didn't get any cooperation from the state. Now we have a gentleman from the DOT attends all of our meetings. And speaking of meetings, we haven't had one for the whole group since last October because of the virus thing, but actually the executive committee meets a couple times a month by phone. We sent a number of letters to CN Railroad, asking them to do something with the rail lines up here throughout the state. And it was signed on by our state and federal legislators, the governor, DOT, et cetera, and state of Michigan. Back on the 22nd of July, I received a note from Brian Buchanan, who is the regional person out of Chicago for Wisconsin. And with all the letters and the push we've given CN, they decided to sell 850 miles of low density lines in Wisconsin and Michigan and Ontario. So basically, and Clark has a map. I had sent all this stuff to Clark by email here about a month ago, basically. So we're working on, and the DOT is really working with us. Actually, the railroad asked the Wisconsin DOT to purchase the lines, and the DOT cannot do that. So CN is going to hire a bank to sell the properties, and the DOT is going to survey the properties, look at them, make sure what the value is. And they hope to have this done within a year, the sale done. And if that happens, then the DOT will work with a short line, because we're assuming it'll be a short line or two that will purchase this, because the rail lines are scattered all over the state. They're marked in red here. As you can see, they're not just a lot, but there's, excuse me, that's the wrong one, but they're all over the state. But most of it is up here in the northern part of Wisconsin, going east to Michigan. So with that, if the sale goes through, the state will come in and help a short line to rebuild the lines. There's money there to do that with, to get rail service back in our area of the woods here, northern Wisconsin. So that's been a plus. It's taken a lot of work, but we've accomplished something. And CN, I think, is really looking forward to selling this. And it started out just to sell the northern part. They're going to sell all the way down to Wausau, which they've added a lot of extra track for sale. So with that, if anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. And also with the budget coming, it's a fee of $500 per county to belong to Northwoods Rail Transit Commission. And myself, most of our meetings are in Rhinelander. I don't charge any mileage. I do it all on my own because I believe in having rail up here, and there is a need for it. So any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Well, it's public comments, we can't ask questions at this point, but are you going to stay for further discussion later? During the meeting?
I can, sure.
Because one of the items I think this would be relevant to.
We'll be talking about the overall budget and basically the organizations that we have been requested to give money to.
Yep.
So this would be one of those things. So
Okay, I will stay on. Any
Okay.
other questions or?
Well, public comments. we can't
yeah.
ask.
Public comments are not for discussion. You have
Okay.
to put something on the agenda to actually have discussion and question and answer.
Okay.
So
And I guess if anybody has any questions, they can always call me or send me an email, whatever.
okay,
Is that fair enough?
that's plenty fair.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dale.
Thanks, Dale.
Any other public comments? Any other public comments? I don't believe we have anyone else on the phone. Do we, Clark?
There are a couple other people that are not on the committee on the phone, but if they had public comments, they would speak up.
Last time, any other public comments? Without, let's go to item number 4. Approval of the Finance and Economic Development meeting minutes.
This is Supervisor Negro. I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
This is
Thank
Pat.
you.
I'll make a second, then I have a couple comments.
We have a motion by Lori and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I've got a couple comments first, please.
Okay, go ahead.
These are just minor corrections.
This is Pat, right?
The second paragraph, third line, Eric Lindell. Lindell has 2 L's at the end rather than 1. And then towards the bottom of that same larger paragraph, there's Frank with a question mark. Frank's last name is Cohen, Koehen. That's all my comments.
Okay.
Is the motion maker okay with that? And the second?
I'm okay with that.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried. Number 5, discussion and action on CBDG resolution.
Okay, before you, in your packet that you've read, is the Community Development Block Grant closeout, to be referred as revolving loan fund. And we've discussed this a couple times at finance. We've discussed it fully at county board. Now that we've gotten direction from the county board to move ahead with our project, we're making the application, or we're developing the application for granting the money to the highway department for County Road N. This application is, I don't know, 60, 80 pages long. And there's 2 requirements that we have to have in order to grant the money to ourselves. One is we have to have a resolution, and the resolution is listed there. It basically talks about pertaining to prohibiting the use of excess force and nonviolent civil rights demonstrations. This is a requirement of the application for the board to adopt this policy. I think this requirement is related to the historic HUD connection and community development block grant. So I think the issue is this: when they're developing these HUD programs and HUD apartments, they may have people that were either squatting, or we're not going to leave these properties that were going to be redeveloped through the community development block grants. And the policy is that if these people are peacefully protesting during this process, we cannot use excessive force. And so that resolution is right here, and there's the number. The second thing is, and we can do these separately, but the second thing is we need to develop and adopt a citizen participation plan. And so again, this goes back to the historical multi-decade HUD program. We need to host 2 public meetings and listening sessions for the development of the project, which these community development block grants or the revolving loan funds are used for. And again, I think this goes back to redevelopment of large city projects and other things. I don't imagine there'll be an awful lot of comments on County Road N, but it's basically asking the citizens to come in and talk about the project which we have adopted. And so we have a plan that we need to put forth to the county board. The county board will be meeting on September 8th. And so this committee is being asked to make a recommendation to approve the resolution and basically make a resolution to adopt the citizen participation plan. The county board will approve both those on the 8th, and then we will we'll go forth with our project. The deadline is we have to pretty much complete this by the end of the year. So, and there's notices and there's a lot of other things. Matt Erickson from the highway department is basically shouldering the work on this grant since it's going to the highway committee, project. So with that, I would answer any questions or seek a motion, move to recommend these resolution and move to adopt citizen participation plan.
This is Marty Vitek. These 2 items have been a requirement for CDBG applications forever, and they're pretty straightforward. And so I would make the motion to recommend resolution XXX to the county board for approval.
Actually, I do have it listed in my write-up. I didn't have the number from Heather, so the resolution number would be R09-2020-1357.
Okay.
We have a motion by Marty. Do we have a second?
This is Laura, Supervisor Negro. I'll second that.
Thank you, Laura. Any other discussion? I'll call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The abstentions? Motion carried. Thank you. That's good.
Yep,
Um,
I'm also seeking a motion for the, recommend the citizen participation plan to the county board for approval.
This is Supervisor Negro. I'll make that motion.
This is Pat, I'll second it.
We have a motion by Supervisor Laura. And a second, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried.
All right, this will go to,
Hello?
Yep.
the county board meeting on the,
I can't hear you, Clerk.
Lost somebody.
I didn't say anything. I was waiting for Mike.
Okay.
Okay, item next is the airport budget request. Action item.
Yes, and I basically am just bringing this forward. As you well know, we're facing significant budget shortfalls this year. The airport is requesting additional money. So in the past few years, the county has been contributing anywhere from $18,000 to $25,000 to the overall operation of the airport. In 2021, the airport is requesting $87,000 for capital and operations. The capital request can be put into debt levy in order to save our general levy for county operations. This would involve increasing debt levy. As is discussed elsewhere in the meeting, one solution to the current operational budget for Ashland County is to increase debt levy to balance out the decrease in timber revenues. The city of Ashland manages the airport. They developed the budget worksheets for the request. The last page of the budget request, it has future year capital requests, which the county would need to fund via debt levy or general obligations. I'm highlighting this outside of the budget guidelines because it was, I had requested staff to come in with a 0% increase. Most staff were able to figure that out closely, but this was outside of that range. And I just wanted to bring it to the attention of the committee. There, you know, I'll take answers on there, questions on this, but I don't anticipate any motion on this per se, because the overall budget will be approved by the county board.
This is, has, I guess, some history on how we got to the point where this request is coming in more than that 25,000. Is going back right around 7-8 years, the budgets were real tight after Act 10. The city was looking to tighten their budget, and one of the ways it got tightened was at the expense of the airport. Then there was an agreement in that discussion with the airport manager at the time that if they had requests that were larger in the future, you know, exceeding that amount, that we would consider, you know, the city and the county would then consider funding those. So what you're looking at is something that, when things changed a number of years ago, is consistent with how the city and the county agreed to do things. So we did have that discussion, and that was the agreement. Not that we couldn't change this, but it was the agreement at the time. So I think what they're expecting from the airport end is that the city and the county will honor what was discussed a number of years ago in support of requests like this.
Yeah, I would anticipate the airport request budgets in the foreseeable future to be anywhere from 90 to slightly over $100,000 through 2029 there. And actually 2029 is even going to be bigger. So I just wanted people to be aware of that. There is a cost associated with that. That's going to impose taxes on the citizens. So, but the airport does a great job. It provides emergency services. We get fuel for LifeLink. We do projects with Xcel Energy. We have local companies and people who have this. So I'm not suggesting anything on this. It's just I researched it a little bit. Evidently, if the county board did not want to fund the airport, it becomes very complicated quickly. There are grants that were granted over the last 20 years with the assumption that the county was going to be a co-owner of it. If the county wanted to get a divorce, it would be very expensive. Might be a few $1 million actually to get away from the airport. So there's really not any discussion on this. It's matter of whatever the city, puts forth is what we basically will budget for.
This is
That's it.
Supervisor Negro. I've got a couple questions about that. So they can just throw us a budget and we have to come up with the half of it? I mean, that's my big question because,
Well, right now, I don't feel we have the authority to veto a budget. This is, when we're kind of a subordinate co-managers of it. The manager is a city operation that goes through the finance department for the city. It follows their policies. We have 2 county board members who sit on the board. And, but yeah, I guess you would have to talk to the county board members who sit on that board as if they develop the budget together and they're partaking in that. And I think this would be a longer range issue. How do you manage the airport if we're responsible for half of it?
yeah, it just, I mean, I understand the importance of the airport. I hesitate to raise people's taxes in general for the whole thing, especially in a time where we are not certain what our revenues are going to be, and increasing debt levy on this, or having to do, as one of the suggestions was, wheel tax, because I'm not in favor of that. If we're going to use something like that, I would prefer we use it project by project, not just an overall new funding stream, because it is a regressive tax on many of the people who fight to keep their vehicles running and such anyways. But being obligated to whatever payments, and I understand there's 2 people that are on that committee for the county, but just having the percentage of people that use it, for what projects that we have for it, what other funding streams are they coming? Because that's with any other thing, we'd look at what else they're doing to raise funds, and I'm just not seeing a lot of that, especially in something that we just get numbers thrown at us. So I wasn't impressed with the presentation we had last time either.
So a lot of what the airport does is really not up to the discretion. We, because it's a chartered, and I'm speaking way above my level of skill here, but because it's chartered by the city and the county, we have an obligation to maintain it to a certain level. There's a certain class. The runways have to be done at a certain level. They have to be repaved. You have to have lights. All those things basically are not at the discretion of the city or the county. We basically, if we're going to maintain this at a level X, we have to maintain it at level X. And so when you look at these things on here, pavement and lighting reconstruction, overlay, land use, building rehab, runway, pavement, lighting for another runway, apron and taxis. So these are things which the federal government requires you to do when you run an airport. And we could certainly, it may be beneficial to have Bill come over. Bill is the manager. He could certainly speak to the operations of the airport to the county board if we wanted to have a presentation, so the whole county board will understand why we have to increase the budget for this particular operation.
Laura, this is Pat. Most of a decade ago, the city, with budget increases of 0% for a number of years, etc., we looked really hard at the airport and asked a lot of questions. And part of what happened is we did fund them to the extent that they were prior to that, with the agreement that this day was coming where they would need more funding to make up for some things that were being put off. But we also knew that some of this stuff in the coming decade was coming down the pipe. So part of this is the chicken coming home to roost from higher budgets most of a decade ago for a number of years. And part of this too, I think, the finance director for the city of Aspen, she is very thorough and very good at what she does. And so when she put the budget together, she's ready to explain and defend everything in there. So I have a lot of confidence that this budget is as tight as it can be, knowing that it goes through her office with the budget. And they also do look for every source of funding that they can find. But your reaction is the same as a lot of us have had when we first looked at this, when we had exposure to it.
So basically, it was a kick the can down the road, and it just ended up landing in the middle of this great time of a pandemic where we have to scuttle to make sure we maintain the level of services for our people.
It is one part of kicking the can down the road, and the lesson there is, sometimes, the day comes where you have to deal with that. But we did look at the economic benefits of this, and they are substantial. It's just that we've got some money that we have to invest in it too. There's more economic benefit to it than I realized when I was first exposed to this. And Clark touched on some of them.
Okay, thank you very much.
So the wish of the board is to request the airport manager to attend the next county board budget meeting, or no?
I may just make contact with him but if everybody else wants to hear it too, we can go ahead and have him in.
That would be a motion. If the committee wants to have the manager come and make a presentation, we could add it to the agenda. I'm sure Chairman Poofall is here. He'd be amenable towards that.
Well, that would be for the sake of the rest of the board. But then again, the rest of the board would take the recommendation of whatever the finance committee brings forward to them, right?
Yes, so if the finance committee makes a recommendation to say they'd like a presentation by the airport manager, Chairman Poofall would just add it to the agenda for September 8th.
What's the board feel?
Laura, if you want to make the motion, I'll second it.
I will make that motion.
And this is
We have a
Pat.
motion on the floor by Laura, and we have a second by Pat. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried. Thank you. Let's move on.
This is Marty Vitek. I'd like to make a quick comment on this matter, if I may. It is not too late. One of the things that I brought up a while ago was, is there some way that the people who use the airport could somehow contribute a little bit more to its upkeep? I'm just wondering if that's a possibility.
I think the same thing, Marty, along with, how many people from Bayfield County are using it. I know there's a $10,000 participation piece in there, but I have a feeling because we have a bigger airport that maybe more people from out of the county are using it. So, natural thought process.
Yeah, it's very seldom that airport is a money-making operation. I've run a city that had one, and I ran another county that had one. It's very seldom that it's a profit center. It normally costs taxpayer dollars to support. So I will set up a presentation on that, provided Bill is available on the 8th. Okay, Mike, we're ready for the next thing. I think it looks like Mike left. So
Okay.
Laura,
Then I'm up. Let me grab my agenda. We are on to the budget discussions. Clark, that's you.
yes. Okay, with decreasing timber revenue, we are seeing a shortfall in the revenues for 2021. The county has to produce a balanced budget, obviously, without using money from the bank to balance the budget. So what this means is some people have said, why don't you take the Mellon money and do that? You can do that for capital, but you can't do that for operations, because if you take bank balance and you balance your operations with something from the bank, next year it's just going to be worse. So in order to balance the budget in simple terms, you either need to raise more revenue or cut expenses. Raising more revenue could involve buying more timber lands to produce more timber in future years. This would involve a long-term solution for future generations, but it would involve the current generation paying more in taxes. We could raise revenue by issuing more debt levy for items which otherwise would be funded by general levy dollars. And I'm going to read that one more time. We could raise revenue by issuing more debt levy for items which otherwise would be funded by general levy dollars. Backtracking, I'm sure you're all aware of the levy limit law, which has been instituted in the state here for a couple decades. So we really have very limited ability to have the general levy increase to cover the shortfall in timber revenue. The net new construction is basically all you get for general levy increase. Might be, and we're guessing at this point, and I'll highlight this amount later. We're guessing, maybe $50,000. We don't really know yet. We're kind of guessing at that number. So one way to fund your operations is to basically take things such as cars or radios or something you may have put into a general operating budget, and you basically put it on debt levy. That frees up your general levy for operations. We currently have been doing this for a number of years. It involves increasing debt levy to transfer capital expenses and loans from the general to the debt levy, thus maintaining general levy to pay for operations. Increased revenue could also take the form of a wheel tax. This would require the vote of the board to impose a tax on certain vehicles that are registered in the county. We basically just did we just went out there and said $25 would raise $340,000. Cutting expenses poses its own problems, of course. Most of what the county does is mandated by the state, meaning we cannot stop doing these services. I've included a list of the departments and the simple version of a mandate or not. This list is not 100% accurate, as staff are continuing to research and add the state stats to the mandates as we move through this budgetary process. We'll provide an updated copy at the next meeting. If revenues can't be raised, we have few options to match up revenues with expenses. Furloughing employees a number of days per year that they would not get paid for, permanently laying off a number of employees and decreasing our services, increasing employee contribution to healthcare, thus giving the employees a pay cut, decreasing healthcare benefits and/or increasing their out-of-pocket deductibles. We have a number of organizations around the county which we traditionally have given general levy dollars to. One option is to cut some or all of those contributions to help offset our shortfall. This would help, but it would not solve the mismatch between revenues and expenses. We are still gathering budget numbers for healthcare and a few other numbers, but we have a good idea we will be in the red by a few $100,000, and we need to make some decisions before the next finance meeting. Staff would like the finance committee to make a recommendation to study either increase debt levy, increase wheel tax, furlough employees, change healthcare, decrease gifting to outside organizations, laying off employees, or a combination of those. That would provide staff with the direction to come back with a balanced budget to the finance meeting in September and the county board in October for their input if they concur with said direction. I have instructed all staff to submit budgets with 0 staff raises as a starting point. If the budget comes into the admin office with staff increases, we are taking them out. If we see that we can balance the budget with revenue increases, we can always grant a small increase for staff. I'm concerned about staff going above and beyond during a pandemic and either not getting a raise or being asked to take time off without pay and taking pay cuts. So I'm going to go through a spreadsheet next to kind of give you a general idea of where we're at. But before I do that, the information at the bottom of your packet was just about a wheel tax. You can see the municipalities that have instituted this around the state and then counties. So I'm going to decrease this. So this is basically where we start with our budget. And I did not include this in your packet because we just got the information from department heads a week ago. And so we're trying to go through and put this into this spreadsheet and trying to proof it. And it's a long multi-week process. So but this kind of gives us a seat of the pants that we do have a hole to fill. Some numbers we don't know. So like this $1 million of shared revenue, that's a guess. We don't know what that's going to be. But we go through general operations of general government, and we have expenses, we have revenue, and we end up with a 2020 version, a 2021 version, and then we have revenues over here. Then we go through protection and persons and property. And so same thing, we got expenses on the left, revenue on the right. We have health and human services, and we're still trying to vet some of these numbers to make sure that they've not been double counted and that we're not missing anything. Highway, I'm gonna go through the highway department separately because I think it's important for you to understand where we're going with the highway department. We have education, so extension, fairs, tri-county corridor, visitor center, water, libraries. We have conservation and development. So, and here, one of the things that I'm going to try to present to you in a better format for the next meeting is what is the increase of general levy requests for department. So I will highlight like this here, so like this year, they're going from $200,000 to $400,000 for basically the land conservation department, but they're getting a number of grants. There's a grant, there's a grant, there's another grant up here. And so they're budget neutral. So it doesn't increase the county levy, but it does increase the expenses, also increases the revenue. And you'll see that in a number of different departments. One of the things I think would be very educational for the board to help make policy decisions is see what is the overall levy for each department and has that changed? And I think that would be educational for us to look at. If we do have to look at cutting back, where are we going to cut back? We get down to the bottom of this sheet, we have expenditures, got about $400,000 more. So we have to investigate why that is. And then we have revenues is spot on basically of this year. When we go to capital improvements, so this part of the budget here, we're looking at things that we can basically issue debt levy. Debt levy is issued by the county board. The county currently sets the debt levy at the second Tuesday of November, which is like, I don't know, November 10th or something like that. And then we basically take out a short-term loan from the local Northern State Bank, and then we pay it back in the end of February. So that satisfies the Department of Revenue's requirement that we have an amortized loan with a schedule on it. So some of these things that are in here in this budget, if we had money, would be in an operational budget. Let me see if I can increase this here a little bit. So we will have this in a packet for your September meeting because we'll have more confidence in our numbers. So when we look at this, we have some vehicles we're just making monthly payments on. We could basically roll those monthly payments into the debt levy, or we could pay them all off for $39,000. Security cameras for the courthouse some of them need replacing. We don't have proper cameras running for security, which is an issue. Highway equipment is $405,000 and road construction is $620,000. So I'm increasing the road construction by $100,000 and increasing the equipment by $55,000 on the highway. Then I'm going to just stop right here and go into the highway discussion. And this is actually interesting enough, the exact same discussion that you're having about the airport. So we have been giving the highway department $520,000 every year for road construction from debt levy. So we are borrowing money paying it back in the same year, and using it to build and repair roads. This is our 5-year plan. If we basically stay at 520, then basically come 2025, we're going to be in the hole $489,000 plus the original 520. So we're going to have to basically, the sins of our fathers would be, we're basically making people pay $1 million, in 2025 versus going to 620. And so I basically changed it to say, let's go to 620 every year. And then that puts us at $10,000. So that basically would balance that particular operation out till 2025. But you're going to see a tax increase to do that. Or basically you're going to say you want to tax people that you want to tax the next generation. So it's the same thing as the airport, basically. So in here, and that same thing with the equipment, basically, we have been doing $350,000 a year in debt levy for capital equipment for the highway department. And we're going to 405 because otherwise this will free up $55,000 from the general levy that would have gone to the highway department. It frees it up to cover staff salaries and operations. So again, we're trying to maintain our operations and our services. HHS, a boiler. These two items here are an increase to the budget. In my investigation and researching county finances, these are two loans. One is for the Sanborn building for Health and Human Services, and the other is the New Horizon building, which is right downtown here. I basically was going to do the same thing and ask for basically move that from operations and into debt levy. It comes to find out the county was never budgeting for it. And so in this case, this was a miss and nobody put it in their budget. And so, proper government accounting standards mean that you budget for items. And so we have to budget for it, and this is where it's going to sit now. And so I'm putting it into debt levy. So that's another $135,000 increase, obviously, to that. Sheriff Department, we have capital items here, squads, rec officer, trailers, snowmobiles, those kind of things. So basically your capital improvement budget ends up being around 1.5 million. In investigating let's see, where is my, okay, I don't have the investment schedule here. I was going to put that on this schedule. This computer is not hooked up to the regular county network, so I don't have my investment. So one of the things, and I'm looking through our investments, I found a couple accounts. One of them is $84,000 that's left over from the jail bond, and that was never spent. And so that's a number of years ago. It's been sitting there doing nothing for a number of years. And so my recommendation will be to the county board is basically we transfer that into current capital expenditures. It doesn't need to sit there. The second fund I looked at, we have about $240,000 in a capital improvement fund. Again, I think that's a holdover from a few years ago. It hasn't seen any activity for 3 years. And so I'm basically going to take $100,000 out of that and apply it towards capital improvements this year. That'll still leave $140,000 in there in case, let's say, the elevator breaks or we have some other sort of emergency capital expenditure. I don't want to bleed that thing dry. But in another aspect, we don't need close to $250,000 in there doing nothing. So if we get that, we get down to this 8-year loan. So the county was, before I got here, the county was using a line of credit, a $3 million line of credit, and they're just using it to pay for capital items during the year. It wasn't really budgeted, and they just made the same payments. And the state said that was not proper accounting. They did not like it. And so what I did was I closed that line of credit. I converted it to an 8-year loan last fall, and our payment on that is $286,000. And so we're on year number 7 on that. So we got 7 more years to pay at that level. That brings your debt levy to 1.6 million, which is roughly $400,000 more than last year. We continue down to basically, we get to the summary here. So we basically have, we have total expenditures, less our anticipated revenue, less a guess on sales tax. We had put in $1.49 million for 2020. So far, we are doing good on that. Here's funding. Yep, I did not get that on here either. We actually are about, we're actually just a little bit above what we were last year. Yes, Pat?
I want to ask you a question on the line 226. It has less 0.005% county sales tax. Is that 0.005% how you want that written?
It's 0.5% sales tax. So the state has a 5% sales tax, and counties can impose, 69 of the 72 counties in the state impose a 0.5% sales tax. So what I'm doing is I'm basically saying, I'm taking this number here, the $21 million in expenditures, and less our expected revenue, less our sales tax, less our state computer aids, and getting down to what the net general levy is.
Okay, so you're using that as a description as opposed to something in math or in a computation. So it's okay, I think.
Yes, yeah, we have to plug that number in from the, so what happens
okay.
is the state, the next couple weeks will give us some estimates of what 2021 will be. And we can basically take that estimate, or we can just downgrade it a little bit. In my talking to the other county administrators in our region in Northwest Wisconsin, last year we had put in the 1.49 million. We'd put that in because that was a state estimate. Most of the other counties maybe decrease it $100,000. They don't tend to go to the max on that, just in case it doesn't happen. And, if they do get the max, and they get an extra $100,000.
So if you're looking at, you're talking about 0.5%.
0.5%.
And
Yes.
you have 0.005, you have 0.005% written in that heading.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's, it probably could be spelled out. I could just say less 0.5%, but you're right. 0.05.
0.5%.
0.5%
would be the 0.5% that you're using.
Yeah.
But the numbers in the columns.
Yeah, the numbers come from the state.
Yeah, but we should change it to 0.5, correct?
Yep, I will do that. So that gets us down to basically, general levy and our debt service. So that gives you to your total levy of 8.8 million. And then we come down to basically your equalized value. Again, these numbers we're just guessing because we want to know, do we have a hole? And so my best guess is this: if we kept the mill rate the same, and we had this, we'd get maybe 6.8 million for a 7.2. So that's a $385,000 difference that we have a hole, and that's what we're going to have to try to fix. And it's going to be close to that. Like I said, we're guessing at these numbers. We'll have better numbers for you by the end of September, but this gives us enough of a idea to figure out, how are we going to fix this general operation hole? And then the second question would be, is on the debt levy, we had 1.234 and we're going to 1.6. If we don't do that, the question is, if we put that stuff back in operations, then this hole gets bigger on the operational side. And so again, these are more policy decisions coming from the finance committee to the administrator to say, where do we feel we want to go with this, in anticipation that, you're reading the county board, and where is the county board going to end up? We don't want to end up, doubling our staff time by having the finance committee go one direction and the county board not supporting it. So that pretty much is where we're at. We're working on it. I would go back to the I go back to the original possible guidance from the committee to staff, which is direct staff to evaluate the following actions: increase revenues or decrease expenses. And I'll open up for discussion.
This is Pat. Could we ask Dale, is this an appropriate time to ask Dale some questions about what he spoke to earlier?
Certainly.
Okay.
Well, actually, you'd have to ask, is Mike Berlin still here?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good.
I just want to make sure we're on the budget item that you would think it would be appropriate for the discussion. So then, was Mike back or not? I missed that.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Mike.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I was, my network threw me off for a short while there, so I'm back.
So Mike, this is Pat. I just asked the administrator if this would be the appropriate place in the agenda today to ask Mr. Kupchak some questions about what he spoke about during public comment. So I know that you've been on that committee or commission for some time working on that, trying to get railroad back up here, and CN has not been showing some interest in that. My question, or main question would be, if you do go through with this purchase, then what costs are there associated for the counties to maintain that, and what do you see as the economic benefits of that?
You have to speak into a microphone if you're going to speak. Yeah, I'm just going to move the mic back just a little bit here. There.
Thank you. Yeah, there will be no cost to the counties. If the short line purchases it, or a couple short lines purchase the rail tracks, then the state will step in with some funding to help upgrade all the tracks. So the county, there will be no cost to the county. What there will be to the county is jobs. Short line comes in, there's gonna be more jobs. Plus, another big benefit that I see is, as an example, one of our local loggers out of Mellon used to ship by rail. Rail service was so bad, he ships everything by truck. We've got all these trucks. We've got a number of trucks coming from the UP of Michigan through Ashland County, going down like the Ladysmith to the landing there for Verso, etc. And Ashland County has no passing lanes. All school's going to start pretty soon. All the school bus and log trucks don't mix well. So it would take a lot of log trucks off the highway, which would be a big benefit to the state and I think locally because of highway maintenance, etc.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of positives here. Like I say, a short line buys it, they're going to have, with all, most of the trackage is in our part of the state, and it would be good for everybody.
Is there anything else that you would like to discuss with us on that topic?
Well, just that I would like to see the funding continue, and you know, and like I say, I don't charge the county anything. I do it all on my own time, my own expense, traveling, etc. So it's just the $500, and I know the budget is short, but if we want rail, we need to continue working on it. And now is a good time because the state is on board. We got a governor and the DOT that's on board with everything, and CN has decided to sell. So, and the DOT has money to come in and refurbish lines if and when a short line purchases it. They won't do that for CN because CN is large enough and has a lot of money. So the state won't put any money into nothing owned by CN, but they will for a short one.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear the state will pick up doing the work they would do. Years ago, I read that the average semi does as much road damage as around 30 or 32,000 cars. So if more log trucks are off the road, then that should benefit the county by having, you know, fewer log trucks wearing out the roads. So, yeah.
Yeah, and there's another project going on in UP of Michigan that they're talking without rail. Trucks are gonna come from UP down to Park Falls with a load of whatever. A lot of trucks, so a lot of weight on the highway again, so more traffic. Firstly, we need to keep our school kids safe on the highways. So.
Yeah.
Plus general public. So.
So this is the chairman. Let me ask a question with regards to your request is for $500, or what is the dollar amount that is being requested of the finance committee?
$500. That's for a one-year membership to Northwest Rail Transit Commission. We hire North Central group out of Wausau to do all the bookkeeping and do all the reports, and he's on every meeting. He takes the minutes and does all that, sends everything out. So the commission people don't have to do all that.
Any other questions, the board?
Unless you have any questions for me.
I don't have other questions, but I know Dale's been working on this a number of years and
Yeah,
appreciate the effort on that.
Thank you.
When is this fee due?
The bills come out in January. I believe it is January to January, so we have time.
Okay, thank you.
I would appreciate if we could get whatever emails that you had sent to Clark. I would like to look at that information that you sent out. I don't know if Clark wants to forward that or if you want to forward that to the committee.
I can forward it to the committee.
Thank you.
thank you, Dale.
Well, if you have any questions, feel free to give me a call.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
What's the board think?
This is Pat on the request that Dale spoke to, that CN lost a bridge with a storm, I think about 4 years ago. And so that was the impetus for them cutting service here. They didn't want to reinvest in that. And ever since then, Dale was the ADC executive director at the time. They've been working with the group up here to try to restore rail. And so having been familiar with that effort over that time, I think this is something that if they can bring to fruition, I think that would be very helpful for northern Wisconsin and Michigan for a variety of reasons. It's not just the roads, it's the jobs and it's the safety on the highways. So if you can pull this off, I got to tip my hat to you because that was a big uphill battle to even get going on this effort.
This is Marty Vitek. I think that if there's even an outside chance that this can succeed, I would be in favor of it.
Well, let me put this on the floor that I'll make a motion that we support the $500 request.
I'll second.
Motion, do we have a second? Support? We have a motion on the floor to support this $500 request. Do we have a second?
Yes, Marty Vitek, I'll second.
Okay, Marty seconds this. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried. I think we can afford that, yeah. Are we still on the budget here, Clark?
Yep, we're still in the budget, so I'm basically just seeking, if you have any guidance, concerning if we have a $300,000 or $400,000 hole, what is your preference concerning how do we address that? And basically, here's your assumptions. Kind of assumptions is that we're probably going to have a pretty flat general levy request, an increase in debt levy, and then we got to figure out how to basically solve $385,000 of either revenue increases or basically cuts.
This is Pat, going back to the city experience in roughly the 2010 to 2015 range, something that the city administrator did was to not fill positions that became vacant or not to fill them for a period of time to save money. And that way the city did not have to lay staff off or furlough anyone. It did mean that things had to be figured out to make do. So I would add to the list, is there a possibility of not filling positions that are either currently vacant or as people retire or leave to rearrange things so that you can still provide the services but not have to lay staff off.
Yeah, so I think that's almost a department by department, position by position determination. We're three deputies short. I would think we want to fill the 3 deputies that we're short instead of not hiring them, because that affects our coverage of our public safety. Same thing with public health. Do we do this during a pandemic? So the question would be just a general guideline, which is if it's not a mandated service, if we don't have to provide the service, basically, don't do the hiring. And we could certainly do that. I'd have a tough time projecting. The problem with that is I have a tough time projecting what's 2021 going to look like as far as the budget. How many positions, how many people are going to quit?
Mhm.
And is it a position that we don't have to fill? And what does that look like for a hiring freeze? Now, I will say, Eau Claire County, they basically went to, they started out early because they knew this was coming. In fact, we have a shortfall this year of a couple $100,000 because of decreased timber revenue. I did not make any staff layoffs during this year because it was such an unknown factor when we were doing the bids. By the time we figured out what the number was, I think it's too late to basically lay off people, furlough people for this year. So I'm committed to balancing this budget basically for 21. And Eau Claire County, basically, they put everybody, they closed down the government one day, a month. So they don't have any operations or anything, just minimal coverage for sheriff, and they're in the jail. But beyond that, they don't do highway, they don't do public health, they do nothing. And they require staff not to answer emails, they require staff not to answer the phone. And so that way you can take salaried positions and basically pay them less because you only work 9 days instead of 10 days during a payroll period. And so they've already started that process. Other counties have looked at rolling furloughs. So like the extension office here and throughout the whole state, they basically have looked at and say individuals have to take so many days off over the next 6 months. And they did it by salary. So the higher the salary you have, the more days off you have to take, because the assumption is because you're earning a greater salary, you can afford to take off more days. And the lower, like the higher salary people in extension have to take off 3 days a month without pay. Lower paid employees only have to take off 1 day a month without pay. And so those are numbers which we would have to calculate and try to figure out what would the savings be on that. I did do a rough figure yesterday, or Sue did, for, wage increase. Because like I say, I have problems basically cutting people's salary during a pandemic, and they're going above and beyond. If we were to give them a 1% increase, roughly it's around $100,000 for 1%, which again, we're already 385 in the hole, so I don't see how that's going to happen. So any other suggestions or preferences for how we balance the budget?
Yeah, Dick, I just got a couple of questions. Getting back to one of the recommendations of the wheel tax, one sentence in here says that this would require the board to impose a tax on certain vehicles. Now, what exactly does that mean?
So I've not done a ton of research on this. I had Matt Erickson do the research because he's got the connections at the Department of Transportation. Vehicles that are under so many thousand pounds gross weight. So I think, I'd have to look that up. I don't know if it's 8,000 pounds. So anything less.
It's 8,000 pounds.
Well, thank you, Miss Highway Commissioner.
Yeah, well, research geek.
Yeah. There's your answer. So if you got a big commercial truck of 8,000 pounds, it doesn't pay the $25. I think the assumption, and I'm just guessing at this, the assumption is when you have these heavier vehicles that are commercially licensed, they already pay a higher tax rate to the highway departments at the Department of Transportation to pay for the road wear and tear.
That's what it is.
Yes. And so this money would need, if you did impose a wheel taxes can only go towards transportation. So it can only go to the highway or other transportation needs. If you're an urban city like Milwaukee, it goes towards buses. It goes towards bus stations and stuff like that. But we obviously don't have that kind of stuff here. So if we raise $300,000 from a wheel tax, it would go into the transportation, into the highway department. We currently are taking $542,000 and sending it to the highway department from general levy. So if you did that, you'd only send the difference, 200 some odd thousand, and that would free up the other $300,000 to cover this shortfall. So that would be one way to look at it.
So where does that fall in line with the personal vehicle? Car, not a big truck.
So basically, I mean, Laura, maybe you can, I didn't really research this. Do you have an answer for that?
I didn't hear exactly what the question was.
For personal vehicles, I have a number of cars.
Yep.
It's
several
a-
which are for
it-
sale.
Yeah, it's everyone with, I mean, it goes by plate number. So your AUT, your cars, normal cars and trucks, light trucks and such, it falls on those. And then, you know, the stuff in the in between, it's not farm ones. But basically it just kind of shifts it. So whatever, okay, if you look at in the packet, there's the $20 for certain counties and $10 and, you know, it's all what they're looking to fill the holes with. I personally find this pretty regressive, especially in a county with limited funding for our people, but it puts that on them. There are some counties that use it project by project. There are counties that review it every year, but we would, if this did become something that we were going to use, we would decide on what the fee is, and then the state collects it, and then it's that, I don't know, what was it, 17 cents a collection or so. But we decide what it is, and we can make it so it sunsets, or we review it, or things like that. So we would have a little bit of play. I'm not personally in favor of it. I'd like to find something else a little more creative.
This is Pat. The city looked at a wheel tax a number of years ago. It is an extremely regressive tax. And as an observation, one reason it's so aggressive is Walmart, for example, wouldn't contribute anything to it. There's a lot of business owners who live in Bayfield County or a different county that wouldn't contribute. And then the vehicles, you know, you hit that 8,000 point, those vehicles aren't going to add anything to this. So it's extremely regressive, and it didn't pass the city council when they looked at this.
Like I said, we have not done a formal presentation or research on this, because I think before we spend staff time to do any more work on it, I think the finance committee would have to say, generally, we want to hear more about it, or we're not interested at all, so don't waste your time. And so that's one direction I'd be looking for from the finance committee is research this more, or don't bother researching.
I'll make a motion that you don't research it any further.
Motion on the floor.
Would you repeat the motion, please?
Make a motion that the administrator not research the wheel tax any further.
I'll second that, Marty Vitek.
Well, motion by Pat, seconded by Marty. All those in favor?
Can we have a discussion for a sec?
Absolutely. I'm sorry.
No problem. I hate to take anything off the table, but, and even though I'm really, the worst thing is the city could still implement this, and we could we could be double taxing the wheel tax. That's another one of the provisions with this that I worry about, is that something could happen and then the city could do it too, and then we have a piece of our population getting hit twice. It doesn't take into account any tourists. It doesn't take into account, you know, all the through traffic we've got. It just puts us all, it takes our citizens only and makes them responsible for basically our transportation budget. So I just, as we think about stuff like this, I guess, you know, I'm right along with the other guys, so.
You know, just
Out loud talked myself through it, so thank you for hearing me.
Laura, this is, so, you know, your comments that you said were consistent with what the majority of the city council thought. If we, you know, as far as taking it off the table, I understand that thought, but the reason the city council took it off the table was if you need to, you could increase the debt levy, and then that would assign the needed increased tax in direct proportion to the assessed value of properties. And that way the Walmarts, et cetera, would pay their share of the need to collect increased taxes versus just, it's primarily individuals, with often have less assets than some of those entities like Walmart.
Yeah,
So,
truth. Okay.
Call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carried. Thank you.
Marty did have just one more comment he wanted to make. I'm sure it won't affect the vote, but
Yeah, it wasn't that urgent, but I was just going to say that if we get desperate, why, we can always put it back on the table.
Yeah.
all right, so now we're back to the only other way to raise revenue in the state. You can't put on, you can't increase your sales tax by state law. You can't do franchise fees concerning right-of-way acquisition for utilities such as Excel. Cable, you can't do franchise fees on that, telephone service. Really, I mean, in my experience, the only other thing you can do is just increase debt levy. I don't know how else you would raise more money.
Could you provide an overview of the places the city's making contributions that we might be able to cut?
The what?
One of the things on your list was there was some organizations that generally some money has been given to.
Yeah, so we can come back with those. They're not substantially large, but you'll see, you got, economic AADC, you got Northwest Regional Planning Commission, you have the tourist. I don't even know what ITBEC. It's a tourist thing. Can't remember what it is. We fund a hazardous household waste cleanup. There's BART, Great Waters Library, Visitors Center, Tri-County Corridor. The fair extension. So those are, extension's the biggest one, obviously. And so those are all basically just, we're just gifting money to outside organizations.
Are you sure that all of those we have the option of cutting? I suspect there's a few that we really need to, like that one.
Extension, you don't have to. You don't have to do the fair. You don't have to do the recreational corridor. You don't have to do the visitor center. You don't have to do the library, because the library always has its own separate levy. This is above and beyond, I think. I'd have to research that, but that was my initial assumption. Northwest Regional Planning, I don't know if I don't think that's state mandated. It's probably an agreement that the county signed. AADC is not mandated, but I'm sure it was an agreement that the county signed. The Tourism Bureau would be the same. Household management is not mandated. So, when you think about, so there's whatever, there's 8, 10 of them. The railroad, Railroad Commission, are they state mandated? No. Are you contractually obligated to do it? Maybe. I don't know. But it would take out some money, because obviously if you're taking, $25,000 and gifting it to an outside organization, and you're going to require staff to take layoffs and furloughs, you're basically asking staff to basically fund the outside organizations with their layoffs.
I would like to take a close look at this list first.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking back to the city experience most of 10 years ago. A list similar to this is what the city went through, and there were some changes made, but then there was also a greater understanding why the things that were funded were funded. So I think it's really constructive to understand why each of those contributions are made and what's more critical than the core services that the county otherwise provides.
All right, I will come back in September with basically just a delineated gifting list. Is it mandated that we do this? And if not, is there a contractual obligation that we've signed on to that we can't get away from? I mean, the airport's not mandated, but we have signed a contractual obligation. to get in there. And, you know, it's kind of like, you know, you got married and now the divorce fee is going to be really high.
And then in terms of the employees, having been a public employee myself most of my life, if you could do a survey, and if this would be helpful, asking the employees what their thoughts were on the options there in terms of furlough days, and then the health care, and then the pay, to get some input there. You know, healthcare costs, you know, one person might be single and another person might have a spouse on the plan and a large family, and their healthcare costs might be very different in terms of how that would affect them. And some people with furloughs, you know, they're happy to get a little more free time. So if we had some input from them, that might help us to make some decisions that best reflect what staff is interested in.
Okay, can do that.
I just wanted to make a comment with regards to some of these, for the better sake, let's call them elective budget items that we've been funding for all these years. And perhaps it's because at one point in time, they came to the county and the county was sympathetic and had money and funded them. And therefore, it became an annual funding agreement. And okay, a decade or two later, they're still there. But, you know, no idea as to how it initiated in the first place. It would be perhaps I'll agree that it's time to maybe take another look at this with our staff and what have you, so that perhaps we can save perhaps maybe $100,000 or so by not funding these elective, what do you call it, expenditures. Did that come out right?
It did. It all adds
It
up.
did.
Yeah, well, and Mike, I think, you know, not that we're Washington, but every project has its champions.
Mhm.
Every organization has the person who's passionate and people who don't care. You know, there are plenty of people that are passionate about BART. And some people maybe say, I don't use it, I have a car, I don't want to fund it, you know, if that's what it takes. So, yeah, so there, you know, you're not going to get, I'll put together a list and the finance committee can study it more for a recommendation to the county board if they want to so look at that. So.
It's kind of like today, Pat, not Pat, but the railroad people came in front of us and they're looking for $500. And now almost like next year, that's going to be a given. If there could be an asterisk or something behind that particular line item, that this could be a good thing. It's worth $500 just to be on that committee to stay on top of what's going on with the rail up here in northern Wisconsin. That could potentially service Ashland as well, Ashland County, because you know we do have manufacturers and stuff, say down in Park Falls, even though the paper mill is no longer in business, but now they're making cardboard products over there. You know, they just hired 72 people or 70 some people here just this month, I believe it was. So they're back up and running. And you know, rail could be essential to their operation by taking semi trucks off the road and, you know, railing the product in and out. And anyway, you know, if we can add just a little justification why on these other expenditures. I'm just voicing. I'm reaching for information. That would be good, Clark.
Dick, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to make a couple of statements here. I've never been a proponent of balancing any budget on the backs of the employees. I think that's just wrong. Are there any possibilities at all of raising the gas tax?
The gas tax? I don't know.
Well, if you do that, you're spreading out the increase to tourists, to people who don't even live in the state who are here all the time. I think this is a great way of raising revenue, and it wouldn't hurt.
I'll come back with a report on that.
Okay.
Clark, this
Yes.
is Supervisor Negro. During the pandemic, we've been having some people work from home. No, I don't know if the staff feels that's a benefit or not. Have we saved any money by having people rotating through? Has it been, I mean, is it an upsetting kind of thing for an employee to be at home for a little bit and then rotate through and be in the office? Or is there any kind of creative staff solutions that might help a piece of that too? I mean, there may be some people that feel working at home is a benefit. I mean, we've already shown that we can make it work.
Yeah, I think in the long term, you're talking more about employee retention. I think having the flexibility for some positions to work remotely is definitely something that people are interested in. And that might help us keep people that otherwise may have to leave the county if we give pay cuts or healthcare increases. So there is a benefit to having this remote. We have been, let's see. We got 259, well, we didn't get the money, but we got available to us $259,000 from the CARES funding from the governor. And we basically have been buying, everything from, hand sanitizer, plexiglass, legal fees related to orders. We've been buying a lot of laptops and docking stations. So we've been basically, this money is available for us to help with remote work. We actually put in here $50,000 for the dispatch center to basically create a backup, if needed, dispatch console if we can't be inside the jail. So if the jail's infected, dispatch is inside the jail. So we have to be able to remote that. So this is, we are trying to utilize these funds, Laura, to make sure that we are set up for additional, remote work. But as far as eliminating positions from that, I'd have to talk to my department to see if that's a possibility.
I wasn't asking for eliminating. I was just asking if it helped us in, have we saved any money from that? As in building costs, things like that?
No, we haven't saved any money for that because our buildings, I mean, you still have to heat your buildings. Of course, we're not heating in the summer, but I am not aware of any savings. Actually, the only savings actually from the pandemic would be in the travel expenses. So you can see some of the employees, all of the employees are not going to conferences. County board members are not going to conferences. I'm not going to conferences. I would think probably, I don't know, there's probably $10,000 or $15,000 that we haven't spent in mileage alone, would be my gut guess from the pandemic.
Okay.
This is Pat. As you look to balance that budget for 21, I don't think any of us want to lay employees off, and we understand, some pay raise. It does a lot for morale, but it also then goes into their base, which helps in the computation for future raises. So those years where you get a zero raise, really, in the long run affect your pay each year after that. So as you look at this, something in my working career that I thought I appreciated very much from administration was when they said, okay, next year, yep, things aren't going to look as good as we thought. And rather than laying people off, we're going to look at positions we can't fill and then reducing the number of staff or services as people retire or leave and things can be rearranged. And that might mean that some of this doesn't get done in 2021, but you have a plan that says, okay, in a few years, this person's going to retire, then we're going to change how we do things here. And you're working towards making things balance and work and staying in what you can, bring in revenue. It might be just a year or more than a year down the road, but there's a plan to get there where all things work together, which might mean that the debt levy in 1 year is higher than you like, but you know that a year or 2 or 3 down the road, you're going to make some changes to compensate for that. And that way employees are less adversely affected potentially than if you try to make all these adjustments in 1 year. And between the pandemic and timber sales, it's been a rough year. So
yeah, and in my mind, I have a two-step process inside my head, which is one, we need to balance the budget for 2021, Secondly, in a macro sense, where do we feel, we know general levy limit laws are probably not going to change. The legislators in the governor's office, they'll never agree to do this. We've just had a conversation this week about it with WCA, with the administrator group, because they're just like, people are really struggling. We're not the only county. We don't feel there's the political will in the near future, meaning in the next 5-6 years, to do this. So we need to figure out how to, and then the third part of that stool is, what do we think timber is going to do in the long term? Do we want to double down? Do we want to take out $4, $5, $6 million in debt to buy more timberland to invest in, to make sure instead of getting $500,000 or $700,000, we might get $1.5 million out of it every year, type thing. But it's going to involve, again, that's an existential question: is do you want to tax the citizens today for future generations? And if you do that, you have to have confidence that if you raise timber, you farm timber, there's going to be a market for it. What are the paper mills going to look like in this part of the United States? Are they going to be competing against paper from China or Brazil? And what does that look to the price for here? And I don't have answers for that. That's a very large global question, is, do we want to double down on timber to basically help future generations they're going to replace us? Or do we need to figure out how to work within that general levy? And as in the most part of the world, things go up a little bit every year. And if you never give staff increases, you're not going to have employees. And so as those costs go up, but you have no more revenue, what's the long-term balance for that? Which is, so you don't have to do this every year. We do not want to, I agree with you, Pat. You don't want to do this every year. Here's a hammer, here's a hammer, here's a hammer, So you're right. Yeah. Is there more of a long-term solution in addition to fixing the balanced budget needed for 2021?
Well, on the forestry, I own 210 acres and part of it's in forest, and I have a forestry plan. As a long-term investment, I'm optimistic about forests. When you look at things around the world, in fact, I plant a few hundred trees every year, partly because of that. I think it's a good investment. So I would support looking at that. One of the things that in recent years, there's been a company down in the Eau Claire area that has bought standing timber here, some real nice timber, and they clear cut it. And when those parcels go for sale on the land auction, because they've been clear cut and don't look very good, there's been some parcels, at least in Bayfield County, that have gone rather inexpensively. And so the county could consider, but you'd have to be ready to do this, as far as approval and funding, et cetera, to bid on some of those, because some of those have been as little as $400 an acre. And so, in fact, adjacent to the farm, the land I own, in the last 20 years or so, there's been some parcels like that. So the right parcels at the right price, but you got to be ready to acquire it at that point.
Yeah, Chris Hoffman had sent me a letter, and I didn't put it in the pack yet, talking about part of this. And one of his suggestions is we basically take an additional $100,000 a year on debt levy and put it into a land acquisition fund, so you could respond if a parcel came up and you had $300,000 or $400,000 in there. You could get it. I didn't put it in the pack yet or bring it up for discussion because I'm still waiting to hear back from the Department of Revenue if basically issuing debt levy and then putting it inside the bank is an allowable expense. How tight do the restrictions need to be on that fund? Normally, what you issue for debt is what you have for capital that you either have already spent, meaning we spent $5 million on a building and we have 10 years worth of bonds, we've already spent it. They normally don't say 10 years from now, we're gonna build a new government center. And so let's accumulate $20 million to put in a government center over the next 20 years. So I'm trying to figure that out, but that is, and I would like the board to kind of weigh in on that to say, is that something that we wanna look at concerning this long-term viability of the next generation,
And related to that is there may be parcels along, streams or lakes or rivers that would be desirable for the county to control versus other uses, or maybe you want trails to go through recreation purposes, et cetera, that they may benefit the counties in ways beyond just the timber.
Okay, any other discussions on the budget?
This is Supervisor Negro. Since we're throwing out longer-term plans with land acquisition, I'd also like to poke out there about combination of services with the city. I don't know how much has been looked at. I don't know. I know I have talked with the city administrator, and he seems very open to it. I just don't know. I mean, both the city and the county are having like issues. So when we come through with services, are there things where we can combine, have something more streamlined, and not have as much taxes having to go out on our people? I mean, until we get some kind of land acquisition stuff built up, or you know, more jobs or small businesses supported and brought in, we might have to look at streamlining some of this stuff. When we all had money, it was really nice to have 2 of everything. But do we really need 2 of some things anymore? So I just want to throw that out there.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, that gives me some general guidance to continue working on the budget and staff to keep plugging away at this thing. Mike, we're ready for the next agenda item.
All right, monthly reports, monthly financials, yes.
Yeah, so these are the financials. I basically have gone through them. I just talked to Sue yesterday. What I go through is I go through all of this documents and I highlight the things that are, they stand out. I look at the percentages, I look at the dollar amounts. A lot of these things, when you look at them, especially in health and human services, some of these things are only billed once a year, and so you'll see $1 million worth of expected revenue, but it doesn't get billed out till the end of December after you've completed the year. So these are issues, and I had a couple we're just going to look into, but I don't have any alarming issues for the board to be aware of or make decisions on.
The board have any questions?
Okay. Next item.
Verbal administrative updates.
Yeah, so there's a couple other things. This is a letter that came to my attention and Chairman Pupel from the chair of the town of Morris, is asking county support for a safe multi-model trail in the city, from the city of Mellon to Copper Falls State Park. And so he has a letter here. I'll include this in the next packet for everybody, but they're looking to raise approximately $800,000 project, and they're asking for county support. They didn't put in a request, so this will be something I'll add to the non-mandated gifting that we do to your September packet. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And that came from Jeff Earhart. And then the timeline, just to, the timeline for the budget here, we are here, 27th. Tomorrow, we're supposed to get a final equalized value report, which is pretty much what your taxes are based on. Then next week, we would get the debt limit report, which is how much debt can you take on as a county. We are not even close to that. The issue is it's a percentage of your overall valuation, and we have like $1.2 billion of valuation. So we're not even within the ballpark of that. And then the levy worksheet, levy limit worksheet comes out next week also. That's kind of where the rubber meets the road, where you put the equalized value together, along with some pre-filled in numbers that will basically determine what that one number is. Basically this number here, the 6.8, what is that number going to look like? And then after that, we're going to get some insurance numbers. So insurance, for those who are not aware, we are a self-funded organization. And so we basically have a bank account that we put money in on a monthly basis. And the BPA is our benefit plan administrators. They take money directly out of that. They have access to that bank account and they pay all the bills. So they, when you get a bill from MMC or Essentia or your pharmacist or physical therapist, it comes basically BPA packages that all up and sends one check to MMC for all the work that they've done throughout the past month for us. When we put out for bids, basically for reinsurance. So if we have a claim that's over $65,000, one individual, that in turn, we get reimbursed for all $65,000 plus the overage of that. And so that went out to 20, we sent that out to 20 companies for reinsurance, it's called, or overage. And then we also have another third type of insurance, which is, let's say we had a whole mess of claims that were $60,000, so $5,000 below the limit, and we had claim after claim after claim after claim, but none of them reached the reinsurance rate. We have an overall limit of outbound money coming out of the county to pay, and so that's a third type of insurance. And so we basically are satisfied. We are satisfied with our monthly contributions that we're putting in the bank. We've had a slightly lower utilization of healthcare due to the pandemic during the early months of the pandemic. And so, but some of those things tend to catch up with you. If you're going to have a knee replacement, you're going to have a knee replacement. Even if you didn't get to do it in May, you're going to do it in September. So some of those things happen naturally. We're expecting it probably to balance out, but there are some costs which will never be paid because some people healed themselves. So they didn't go to the doctor because whatever they had an ear infection, it just went away. So there's a small percentage of claims which will never happen. So that happens basically in September, hopefully before our next meeting. Our shared revenue report. So this is the top number here on this spreadsheet. And that basically that's a number that the state actually shares, and so with us, we get that number from them, and that's about $1 million. One of the key issues that we're going to face in future years, because the state budget's on a biannual basis, our $1 million for 2021 is probably safe. Going forward in 2022, 2023, when the legislators come back together and do this, the state is $2 billion in the hole. I'd be surprised if they don't touch shared revenue, which would be a further cut for the following year. And so that will be another issue to face going forward. And then after that, basically, I'm proposing that you guys are okay with this. I'm proposing coming back to you on the 24th, Thursday, the 24th of September at 9 a.m. Is everybody okay with that date, the 24th of September? Okay, so let's do we'll do September 24th at 9 a.m. And then the county board, I'm going to take to the county board on Tuesday, October 6th. So that'll give, if we make final adjustments to this, we may not be balanced by the end of September. We still may be in the hole, but that will give the county board opportunity to weigh in. And then the county board will weigh in on the 6th. We got a week basically where on the 15th of October, that will be basically your last review and recommendation for the county board. And that's a hard date. And then after that, we basically, so we have to send it in for a public hearing. We have to publish the notice on the 21st. We have the board meeting on the 11th of November for approval of the budget. And so the finance committee will take in comments from the county board from October 6th, and they'll basically incorporate that into a budget on the 15th of October for basically final publication. Any questions on the timelines?
Could you go back down to the bottom of that again, please?
The what?
To the bottom, scroll down on that document.
So going forward from there, basically, we have the public hearing on basically on the 11th, somewhere around in there. We close on the debt levy loan and receive the money. And after we receive the money from the bank, then we basically on the 15th, we would certify the levy with the state. We send it down to the state and say, here's what we're going to levy for general levy and debt levy. And we have to have the money ahead of time. I've already talked to Northern State Bank, talked to Stephanie. She is, I said I might need, I don't know, we haven't decided, but anywhere from 1.3 to 1.7 and, for 75 days. And she was fine with that. She goes, that's not a problem for them at all. So whatever we come up with, they'll be able to fund for 75 days. That's my report.
We need a motion to accept his report? No?
Nope. Nope.
Okay. Next meeting date?
24th of September, 9 a.m.
Any final thoughts, questions? Looking for a motion to adjourn?
I'll move we adjourn. This
I'll
is Pat.
Marty Vitek, I'll second it.
We have a motion by Pat, second by Marty to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? I need to apologize. I need to talk to